Great, thanks, Julia. I appreciate everyone joining today's webinar, and we're going to talk about a couple different things. The first one is around the latest market trends that we're seeing in the market, and also what we're seeing with our customers building on Xamarin and also building on Azure together. And we'll also talk about the mobile and cloud developer and architect role and how that's changing from, say, someone who's architecting and developing an intranet application or systems that resided on desktops in the past and how architecture is changing. Then we're going to spend the brunt of and the most of the time working on how Xamarin and Azure work together in this webinar. We've built a demo application that we've called Xamarin CRM that we've put on GitHub as a public repository that has both the Xamarin code as well as the Azure backend code to use as a reference architecture that everyone can download, and we're going to share that URL in just a few minutes. And through that application, we work through a couple of different key challenges that we've seen Xamarin and Azure customers and just mobile developers work on and have challenges with in the past. So the first one is around security and authentication, specifically with how to utilize OAuth effectively and also single sign-on, especially if you have an existing on-premises Active Directory, and how do you federate that to your mobile application. Secondly is how do you do data access and also data synchronization from a mobile device and do it reliably with either a cloud backend or if you have to do it from an on-premises system that's protected by a firewall. And then thirdly, you may have a plethora of existing REST and web services that were built for prior integration projects. And Xamarin and Azure provide a great opportunity to reuse those and extend those existing systems and investments for your mobile initiatives as well. And then lastly, the whole build process and building mobile applications and cloud is changing how the expectations for delivery are being expected by your customers. So how do you do fast innovation and frequent releases on your mobile initiatives? And make your developers and also your executives and tech leadership in your company be the unicorns that your customers are looking for. So the first mobile trend is how mobile is just redefining computing. So Wired Magazine predicted in February of this year that in less than 2 years, a smartphone could be your only computer. And then some of the data that we've seen that especially along the millennials, people aged 18 to 34, the mobile device is their primary computing platform. It's the first thing that they look at in the morning, the last thing that they look at in the evening, and they're actually using it to consume more digital media than they are on traditional desktops and laptops. And we're also seeing that just over the past couple of years, we're really seeing how mobile is redefining business models and how it's redefining how business is done, especially in areas that have weak user experiences. And so these are some great industry examples of how mobile has transformed businesses. So Airbnb is a great example around the travel and hospitality industry. Uber is a great example, especially if you've ever ridden an Uber and if you live on the West Coast, especially in San Francisco. Uber is just all over the place, and you think about what that prior experience on getting a ride via taxi was a couple of years ago versus how convenient and it's done via mobile device where it's utilizing maps, it's utilizing touch on the mobile experience, and it's utilizing the cloud for mapping and logistics and prediction on when your driver is going to arrive. That entire experience has been transformed. And if we also look at retail, companies like Instacart and Amazon are doing things with mobile around grocery delivery and really making lives and making things much more convenient than they have in the past. So as you think about your mobile initiatives, think about not only how do I upgrade an existing app that may be reaching end of life, but where are the opportunities to actually redefine the business model or the business process and utilize the sensors on the device to actually accelerate what the user input would normally put in and just say, hey, let's just actually just grab the GPS location and let's geocode that address, which is something that Uber is doing. The mobile trend number 2 is around device diversification and fragmentation. So this has typically been associated with Android, with around the thousands of different manufacturers and different device models out there. But if any of you listened in on the Apple keynote a couple days ago, you'll see that this is becoming true of iOS as well. And especially with the iPhone 6s series, they have new features there like the 3D pressure-sensitive touch, which is unavailable in any other product in Apple's lineup. And conversely, they also have split screen and multitasking features that are available in iPads that are unavailable in iPhones and iPod touches and also older iPads as well. So you're starting to see this diversification and fragmentation happen in Apple as well. So more specifically, if you look at Android, we've got in 2015 around 1,300 different brands making Android devices. And you also have operating system fragmentation, where Android 6.0 Marshmallow is about to be released within the next few weeks. But if you look at the current state of operating system adoption, there's some or less than 20% utilizing Android 5.0, and the rest on a different variety of Android 4.0 releases between 4.1 and 4.4. And you've got the screen size fragmentation, ranging from smartphones, large smartphones, and different tablet sizes. So now we have over 24,000 unique Android devices in the market and 1,300 device brands. And you notice that some of these Android devices are using either forked or altered versions of Android. They may be OEM specific, like say Samsung provides some skinning on their version of Android. You have Amazon that has their Fire tablet lineup of Android-based devices, and then also Cyanogen, which is starting to appear in handsets, especially in the Asian market. Now for iOS, if you look at the form factor fragmentation, we see that we have the iPhone 6s and the iPad Pro, which was announced just recently. But then now we have features available only in certain models, like 3D Touch, which I mentioned earlier, and the Apple Pencil, which is essentially a stylus that's available for the iPad Pro only, which was announced just about a week or two ago. And as I mentioned, multitasking is only available in the iPads, and certain certain multitasking features are only available in certain models, and side by side is only available in a subset of those. So when you think about building your mobile apps and either supporting cross-platform or even if you're only supporting Apple, you need to think about fragmentation, device diversification, and which devices you plan on supporting. So plan ahead and think about when are you going to need access to the native APIs. So for instance, if you may be, say, in the medical industry and you want to use the iPad Pro for hospital staff to have a better connection and more accuracy in recording information with patients, the Apple Pencil might be the ideal device for them to use. And so think about your development platform and which one gives you the flexibility to actually take advantage of that immediately with your application development. You're also going to need to think about mobile app testing to verify that your app works on this different matrix of operating system versions and devices. And then also think about app monitoring to respond and adjust. And so you respond to app crashes, which are inevitably going to occur just among the thousands of different users and the different devices that your customers may be using. And then also it gives you insight into what the users are using as far as features, and so you can plan ahead and have a data-driven conversation about what you should be focusing next in your application. Now, if you're focused on enterprise and vertical applications, really this is thinking about that Uber and Instacart and Airbnb example around how do we rethink the user experience. So if it's a company-specific or an employee-faced application, what are some ways that you can actually speed up the data entry process? So perhaps if it's a manufacturing application, could you introduce barcode scanning, NFC or RFID to actually get data much more accurately than you did in the past? Or perhaps you have a customer loyalty program. What are some ways that you can connect with your customers and engage with them much more in a much more natural manner than you did prior to mobile? Now you also want to still think about testing, but really test for agility and velocity. So sharing and reusing skills and code so you can deliver more with fewer people. And then how do you eliminate regressions through automated testing, because you're trying to be as lean as possible. So we have many customers who are utilizing Xamarin and Azure today to deliver some great experiences for their customers and also internally. These are just a few, and I just wanted to call out two real quick. Alaska Airlines is utilizing Xamarin and Azure to build their next generation customer loyalty program and customer engagement. So it's powered by Azure, and then this is a consumer-facing application. And then Mixed Radio, based out of the UK, is delivering a consumer media and entertainment service for delivering and streaming audio, and that it's available in both the Google and Apple app stores. So let's talk about how mobile and cloud are redefining the user experience. And I wanted to step into our first demo, which is showing you our Xamarin CRM demo application. So these are just some screenshots, but I will step into a demo real quickly. And I just want to explain what this application does. So this application was built in Xamarin Forms. We're reusing over 95% code across iOS and Android. So we are building our UI and our backend logic in C#, and we're also, as I mentioned, using nearly 100% code reuse across both. And it compiles into native code on each platform, and it's utilizing Azure on the back end for identity and authentication, our web APIs, and also database synchronization for orders that we're collecting. Now, in this scenario, this application is for a company that is selling 3D printers, and this application is intended for mobile salespeople to enter orders, to meet up with customers and follow up with them, and so they can do this on the go and meet with customers directly. So let me go ahead and switch my screen to show you how this application works. Now, I've already logged in, but we are using Azure Active Directory to log in, so we have a single sign-on experience. And on the left, we are showing this in our iOS, and on the right, this is Android. Now you notice that we have native experiences on both. A good example of that on this screen is that if you look along the bottom of the iOS screen, we have different tabs for sales, customer, and products. And in Apple's tabs, you have both text and an icon, and they render along the bottom. In Android, tabs render along the top, and it's just text only. They don't include icons. And so with Xamarin Forms, it understands what platform it's running on and renders the native controls for doing that. So we coded this once for representing these tab controls, but Xamarin Forms is smart enough to know, okay, it's Android, the native experience, the tabs are going to be along the top, and it's utilizing Android controls. And the same thing we're doing on iOS. Another great thing that you see on the screen here is the graph. So this is actually provided by one of our Xamarin partners called Syncfusion, and they're one of many different partners who are building an ecosystem of Xamarin components and Xamarin Forms controls that you can plug and extend what your solution can look like and make them look really beautiful, which is how this app looks right now. Let's actually take you to our products page, and this is the product catalog of 3D printer parts that's available for sale to our customers. We're doing a list view using the MVVM architecture, and we're calling a REST service running in Azure. And as you can see here, these are simple list views, so the data binding is very straightforward, simple, but also extensible, so you can also include some of these smaller icons on the left to show thumbnails of the different products here. And here, again, this is all reusing the same code, but rendering it natively on each platform. Now, if you actually want to do platform-specific functionality, you can still do that, and that's what we're doing here. So if we go to our customers and we're going to pull up the Bay Unified School District, we can look at our contact information at a glance, and then I can also utilize the phone dialer to make a phone call and interact with the native capability of Android and iOS. One thing that you can also do is also render maps. So here on the Android version, it's natively and by default utilizing Google Maps, and it's using Apple Maps on the iOS version. And to add even further convenience, we can go ahead and leave the application and get driving directions. So for our mobile salesperson, this is an all-in-one solution, and we can go ahead and get started. All right, so that's a quick taste of what the application does. And as we talk more about how we solve certain challenges, we're going to dive into the code, and then you have a chance to download this and try it for yourself. So let me go back to my slides here. All right. So at a high level, we're doing data access with a local SQLite database, and we're doing a data sync with Azure SQL. We're sharing the code so we've got a reusable UI and app logic, and we've got native performance because we're doing native binaries on each platform. On Azure, we're doing push notifications and also authentication for federating identity for secure access. Now, we're not synchronizing or touching on-premises, but you do have the capability of doing that with Azure by doing either data synchronization or utilizing a VPN or hybrid connections to synchronously connect to on-premises systems. So let's talk about how Xamarin works for folks who may not be as familiar with Xamarin, and then we'll actually dive into the code. So we'll just spend a minute talking about how Xamarin works. So Xamarin utilizes C#, where you can build in .NET and use C#6. You can choose to use Xamarin Studio, which is our lightweight IDE, which runs on Mac, but you can also use it just within Visual Studio. So in the Visual Studio experience, it's just like writing any other .NET application. You could set breakpoints, you have full IntelliSense, and then you also can connect to either the simulators for iOS and Android, or you can connect directly to a device connected wirelessly or via USB and debug directly against a device, which is actually pretty cool. So we provide native performance on both platforms. So we compile to ARM binaries that can run in Apple's and be downloaded from Apple's App Store, and APKs that run on iOS and run just in time on Android devices. So we can use one team, one set of code, and one set of tools to optimize budget and accelerate delivery. And we can share nearly 100% of the code, especially if you're using Xamarin Forms. Now, if you need specific functionality for, say, like I mentioned, like the Apple Pencil, or you want to do things with Apple Pay, we provide 100% API access to those to that functionality on iOS and also their counterparts on Android, but they're all accessible via C#. So if you do need to get into the guts of, say, Android, you can look at the Android developer documentation, but within Visual Studio and Xamarin, you can access all those via C# and have all the benefits of utilizing autocomplete and IntelliSense. All right, so that's a quick overview of Xamarin. I want to hand this over to Kirill, who's going to talk a little bit about Azure, and then we'll talk how we actually integrate our solution together to work better together.
When it comes to choosing a cloud provider today, there are a few things that set Azure apart from the pack. For one, Azure is a proven enterprise platform used by more than 60% of Fortune 500 companies today, and many of them have been using Azure for years. Azure offers you a number of flexible ways to deploy your application. Not only you can publish your app to the public Azure cloud, whether it's just on a VM or whether using our application platform, you can also publish your app to one of the data centers hosted by our service providers, or if regulation or security concerns require you to run your app in your data center, you can deploy Azure there. No matter which choice of deployment or combination of deployments that you choose, you benefit from exactly the same developer experience or management experience with Azure. Right. Azure is one of the very few cloud platforms that have truly global footprint. Here's a nice graphic where you see Azure data centers all over the world in every region. We have more than 100 data centers, more than any cloud provider out there. And we offer you great network facilities, largest VMs, and so forth. You can deploy your application anywhere in the world or everywhere in the world if you so choose. Now, one other thing that sets Azure apart on the next slide is the application platform that Azure provides. Many of you have probably been using already some of these services. For a few years now, Azure provided a great place to run your web apps using Azure websites, build and run your mobile backends using Azure Mobile Services, integrate disparate systems, whether they're running in the cloud or on premises, using integration capabilities like Bistock services, publish web APIs to the cloud, or use your existing APIs and expose them to the internet using API management, or take advantage of our enterprise messaging capabilities, including mobile push notifications. Recently, we have announced an integrated platform, one service called Azure App Service, that unifies all these capabilities together, providing one developer experience for your backend code, no matter whether it's a web app or mobile backend or integration app or API, providing one management experience and one low pricing. Let's drill into mobile aspects of it with App Service Mobile. It's formerly known as Azure Mobile Services. It has been around and generally available since 2013, for a couple of years now. And it's recently have been integrated with App Service. So now you can combine it, both your web and mobile backend can run in one place with one developer experience. And we also provide a number of new updates currently available in preview. Let's drill in further into mobile capabilities that App Service provides. It's a set of services, if you will, a set of capabilities. For one, App Service offers you a number of connectivity options when it comes to data. You can connect to your data sitting in a SQL database in Azure, or a SQL database on-premise, or Oracle database anywhere you run it, or enterprise systems like Office 365 or Dynamics, but it doesn't stop with Microsoft enterprise systems. You can connect to Salesforce or many other SaaS APIs out there. And any of those data connectors carry with them an important capability like data sync, which allows you to build apps that work offline and synchronize data with the backend systems like Salesforce or SQL when connectivity is present. App Service offers you a plethora of authentication options, and for enterprise apps like the CRM that we're showing today, you can use Azure Active Directory, which also supports synchronizing with on-premise Active Directory. Azure offers you a cross-platform push notifications engine and other enterprise messaging facilities. You can push messages to any device, including some Android clones that are popular in China. And you have lower latency in-app messaging experience as well. All of these capabilities are offered to your app via native SDKs, whether you build your app in Objective-C or Java. But of course, if you're using Xamarin, then you can take advantage of the true awesomeness of C# and take advantage of features like link expressions when you connect, for example, to the data sources I mentioned. You can extend these capabilities with custom backend code written in any language, but when you use .NET on the backend and when you use .NET on the client, a nice awesomeness comes to play that Steve will share with you.
Great, thanks, Kirill. So what are the benefits of utilizing Xamarin and Azure together? So from a development experience, it's utilizing your existing skills with C# and full integration with Visual Studio. So you can utilize C#6 for on both the mobile and cloud side, build and debug from Visual Studio, which we're going to demonstrate in just a few minutes. And you can also utilize the thousands of NuGet and partner components that are available, as long as they're PCL or portable class library. And you also have the code reuse, and that can work in two different ways. So code reuse across platforms to reuse your application logic or UI written once, and you can utilize it in iOS, Android, and obviously Windows phones. Or you may have existing app libraries and code that may be residing on your web application or running on existing, say, .NET WinForms desktop applications. You can oftentimes reuse most of that code and convert those to PCL and run those on your iOS, Android, and Windows Phone solutions. Now, utilizing these together, you have the flexibility of writing for all three platforms, and then also extending your existing assets from on-premises, and then, as Kirill mentioned, just integrating with a whole bunch of cloud services and other third-party and ERP systems. And this is how you would do it. From the Azure App Service, you can extend the existing systems, as I mentioned, with either the VPN or hybrid connections, And so for identity, you can basically do a sync with an on-premises Active Directory, with Azure Active Directory, and then that's where you can do the authentication with mobile. And that's what we've done with our Xamarin CRM demo application. You can also do synchronous calls if necessary, or data sync with on-premises databases, and also call on-premises services. So let's take the first tier, and that's how we created the mobile user experience. So this is what you're seeing are screenshots of the iOS and Android product screens for our Xamarin CRM application. Now, we've done this with Xamarin Forms, and as you can see on our code screenshot on the left, the definition of that is fairly straightforward, and you have the full benefits of IntelliSense, and also you can compile this before deploying, so you're making sure that it works correctly and eliminate problems before doing your visual check on your device or simulator. Now, you also have the choice of doing this with XAML. And so XAML is Xamarin specific, and you can define an XML, use our XML markup to define what that UX looks like. You can also do, both in the C# version and in the XAML version, do things like constraining the input type. So if you look at, like in the keyboard type, we have either email, telephone, or text, or even numeric. So we can constrain the input to use the different keyboard types that you normally see and associate on your mobile device, and making that data entry faster and more convenient for your end users. So I'm going to hand it back to Kirill, and he's going to talk about how we've architected the cloud backend in Azure, and then we'll talk about how we've integrated the two together and make them communicate back and forth. So Kirill, go ahead.
Thanks, Steve.
And I'm going to give you control of your desktop. So you are a presenter now.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Your journey with Azure starts with Azure Management Portal. What you see here is a modern management experience where you have access to all of your resources running in Azure or managed through Azure at your fingertips. More than 100 different types of resources you can manage. And one of them I have here is a mobile backend. And what you can see is a management blade that I can use to take a peek at how my service is doing, what's happening, what errors are occurring, what's the traffic like. I can scale it with one click. I can check how much am I spending on this service. I can set up alerts to help me understand and get either messages on my phone or emails when the service is down. App Service provides a number of DevOps functionality for you right in the box, where you can integrate with a variety of source control systems, CI. You can use staging slots, back up your service if you need to, configure, put your service in a virtual private network if you need to access to on-premise resources, or use hybrid connections. Specific capabilities that are offered to you are for mobile backends, mobile backend capabilities, right? And you can connect to multiple data sources or configure push notifications. We also help you get started very fast, and that's one of the differentiations about Azure. It's the experience really sings when you want to get started with something new. So here we can get started and build and get a Xamarin Forms app connected to a cloud backend in less than a minute with App Service and Xamarin. Now, once you have your service, you can extend these capabilities with custom code written in anything. But if you write in .NET, you're going to be using Visual Studio. So here I have the Visual Studio project for our CRM app. And App Service offers you, by NuGet packages, few extensions to a standard Web API experience. Specifically, we offer you this base class called Table Controller, for example, that allows you to connect to a variety of data sources and expose your data via mobile-friendly or data endpoints. And built into the Table Controller is support for data sync, for pagination, filtering, query, you name it. It's anything that you typically need with data, so you don't have to write this code yourself. Now that I have inherited my base controller, if you look at product controller, I can implement custom logic around my CRUD operations without worrying about how do I make data sync work with this. Now, once you have the backend running, consuming it from Xamarin is very straightforward. And once Steve takes control over the screen,
Okay, go
all
ahead,
it
Kirill.
takes is one line of code right here to connect your Xamarin app to your mobile backend. Of course, if you want to do something with mobile backend, you probably need to write a few more lines of code. And this is a good transition to our challenges, to a set of common challenges that face enterprise app developers and how we solve them for Xamarin CRM app. Number one is authentication. Probably the first line of code actually executes when the user interacts with the system is login. And for enterprise apps, Azure Active Directory offers very rich spectrum of options. You can when you log in with Azure Active Directory, you can get access to a variety of enterprise resources coming from Microsoft, with a variety of third-party SaaS APIs, like Salesforce. Active Directory has federation support with a number of SaaS APIs, so you can log in as an Active Directory user to Salesforce or other SaaSes. You can protect your resources sitting on premises with Active Directory by synchronizing your on-premise Active Directory and Azure Active Directory seamlessly. And finally, you can protect your custom resources running in Azure, like your mobile app service mobile backend. And once you configure it, you can log into it. App service mobile backend can use your token to access on behalf of you other systems with Active Directory. All it takes in a simple case to log in with Active Directory is just this one line of code, login. Of course, if you want to do more, there are more options available as part of Azure Active Directory client library called ADL. Now, once we logged in, we want to work with data. And most enterprise apps want to work with data in a way that does not rely on a sometimes flimsy network connectivity. In our case, in our CRM app, Salesforce is always on the go, and they cannot assume network connectivity, and they need to be able to access sales data, add, update, and being able to synchronize this data with the backend when connectivity is present. Data sync is useful for many other scenarios, whether it's just fighting occasional intermittent network connectivity or making your data fresh in your app to not wait for internet to show up, or just synchronize data across devices. All of this is available to you via App Service Data Sync. And here's how it works. So on the next slide, we have a nice diagram that shows data sync in action. On the client, we offer SDK that builds on top of SQLite by default, but you can plug in your own custom data stores. And SQLite is present on all operating systems today. And as your user performs data operations, we record them, and when connectivity is present, we are able to replay those data change operations in order guaranteed against remote and backend. The remote backend in this case are App Service table controllers. And those table controllers allow you to connect and expose via data sync enabled endpoints variety of data options were shown on the previous slide. And that's the power of App Service, that you can synchronize your data between your mobile device and variety of data systems, including on premises, using App Service Data Sync. When it comes to coding experience, on that slide, few lines of code allow you to synchronize data. So all you need to do is to initialize your local data store, work with your data as tables in your local SQLite database using our SDK. You can also just access directly to your SQLite. And when connectivity is available, synchronize either explicitly or triggered by push with the backend using push async and pull async methods right here. So a few lines of code, and you have data sync working between your device and potentially your on-premises data sources. Now, data is not the only thing you typically want to access from your mobile app. You occasionally will have business logic in the cloud. And when you use .NET to implement business logic on the server and on the client, this story really syncs, and Steve will walk you through it.
Thanks. So the third challenge is, how do you actually consume services that may already exist, and those could be web services or RESTful services. So in our code, we have one of our worker classes, we have it called response fetcher. And you can see that basically we're using this particular method for all of our RESTful calls in the application. And as you can see, it's just a few lines of code. And as I mentioned earlier, you can set breakpoints both on the client side, or the Xamarin solution side, as well as on the Azure side, so you can do full round-trip debugging and really understand what's happening in your application during development and troubleshoot much quicker. So I'm going to share the desktop here and show what this looks like and what that experience is. Now, we're using both Visual Studio, but we also want to show what the experience would look like, in Xamarin Studio if you're a Mac user. So as you can tell, we're going to be just setting breakpoints on our Azure service side, and we set breakpoints on the catalog data client, where we're actually and react to a user clicking on the products page. So as we click on that, we see that we encounter our breakpoint in Xamarin Studio. We have the full capability of debugging, and then we've also encountered the breakpoint running in Azure. And this is where we've said the breakpoint is our product controller, and we can see that we are doing our full debugging experience, and we can see exactly what data is being passed back and forth, and we can look at the locals window. So the debugging experience compared to saying, hey, let's attach to like the Chrome Dev Tools if you're doing like an HTML5 solution, it's not even close to the productivity that you can get utilizing Xamarin Studio or Visual Studio. So some of you are already familiar with that, and if you're already a committed Visual Studio user and fan, this is a really great feature, and it makes you incredibly productive. So let me switch back to my slides. Sorry about that. I almost made one of the attendees a presenter. And back to me. Okay, back to my screen here. So that's how easy it is with just a few lines of code to connect to existing web services. Now, the fourth challenge, which we haven't demonstrated in code just yet, we will come up with some samples on that later on in the next couple of months, but it's definitely possible, around how do you integrate with on-premises systems of record. And you can do that in two different ways. We mentioned there's the VPN way using ExpressRoute or the Azure VPN, but oftentimes that requires additional configuration steps and then working with your IT team to making sure that it's safe to poke a hole through the firewall and create a VPN connection. A much more lightweight way to do that is with the Hybrid Connection Manager and Hybrid Connections that's available through Azure. And the way that works is that it runs on a small agent that runs on a Windows server on premises, and that's what initiates the connection from on-prem through the firewall up to Azure, and it's up to that agent to maintain that connection. So rather than the outside in, this is inside out. And then you can expose an endpoint on Azure that your mobile device can connect to. And what it does, it can actually tunnel those requests so you can do both synchronous and asynchronous requests for on-premises SQL Server databases, or if you wanted to connect to an on-premises web or REST service, you can certainly do that as well. And our last challenge is, so now that we've built our mobile application, how do we guarantee that we are innovating quickly, that we are, from inception to deployment is only, making that a matter of a couple of weeks or a few short months to demonstrate that we are accelerating our delivery and making sure that we're having frequent releases to making sure that we're providing the latest updates and new innovation on a regular basis. This is how we're doing this for the Xamarin CRM application. So, from the start of when we started development to where we are now is a span of about two and a half months with one developer. So very, very fast development both on the cloud and on the Xamarin side. So the way that you develop is, what we showed before. It's utilizing Xamarin Studio or Visual Studio and debugging against simulators and emulators. What you also want to start considering doing is also building out test cases as you build new features, so eventually you get 100% test coverage and incrementally as you add new features and do automated testing. And the way that we're doing that is that we use our source code repository is GitHub, and this is a great opportunity to utilize continuous integration. So we're using TeamCity, but you can use any CI system. It can be Jenkins, TFS, Visual Studio Online. All of those work with Test Cloud and with Xamarin. So what we do is on a daily basis, our CI system pulls down the latest code from GitHub. It does a build, and then it takes our test code that we've built in our UI test framework, which is also C# based, and our app binaries, and uploads them into Test Cloud. So we do quick smoke tests, so to speak, to making sure that we haven't broken the build, and we also get fast visual comparisons across running different devices. So we've got over 1,800 physical devices across iOS and Android and Amazon Fire running in our test cloud. And as we get closer to a release, we use larger and larger test sets and more different devices. And we can do visual comparisons very rapidly across dozens of different devices or hundreds at a time. And if there are any crashes, we get the full stack trace and the full native log, so we can do root cause analysis and understand what's happening. Now, the great benefit of this is that it's not only fast and responsive, we're getting test results back within a matter of a couple hours, but we've eliminated an entire manual testing cycle that would normally take a couple of days, and could be errors with the data entry and the way that the data is reported back based on misinterpretation. There could be new features and having to write new test cases that need to be communicated. So all that inefficiency is eliminated. And then secondly, we only have, as a developer team, we only have limited bandwidth on testing ourselves from a time perspective, and there's no way to reasonably expect a developer to test against dozens or even hundreds of devices. It's really only a matter of what's available in the file cabinet, and that's usually a couple of different devices. It might be a tablet and a couple smartphones. So once you get this app in the hands of your users, you also, the story's not over. You have a next release, the new features that you want to add on a monthly basis. And so we monitor our application using Xamarin Insights. So it's currently preview, but it's going to be going GA before the end of the calendar year. And it gives you two things. It gives you crash reports, and not only the stack trace of what happened in that crash or in that exception, but you know exactly who was affected, how many people were affected, and what devices were affected as well. So you can do triangulation and understanding what's happened. And you can also track feature usage, so you can understand what features or what screens users are staying on, how long they're staying on them. And then you can also track events as well. So if you want to time and making sure that the events or the time initiated from, say, a user clicking on, I want to see this particular product, is going out to make that REST service call and the response and rendering it back on the device, you can track the time duration of all those things to making sure that everything's happening within half a second or so, to making sure that you have a great user experience. All right, so that concludes our presentation. So we covered, how Xamarin and Azure work and how they work together, and we also covered a lot of those key challenges that we see a lot of enterprise developers encountering with building their first couple of mobile apps, and how we're solving that with Xamarin and Azure. So if you want to get started, you can get the free trial of Xamarin in Visual Studio 2015. So Xamarin is actually packaged in the Visual Studio 2015 installer. You can have an eval version to use for 30 days. The Xamarin CRM demo is available on GitHub today. So it's github.com/xamarin/app-crm. And everything that we showed you in our demos is up there on GitHub, both the Xamarin code as well as the Azure code. Now, to learn more about Xamarin and Azure itself, go to xamarin.com or docs.xamarin.com. We have these two URLs to find more about Azure, and to get a quick start on Azure, you can try appservice.azure.com. And finally, if you have any questions for us, you can reach us on the Xamarin side at hello@xamarin.com, and on the Azure side via Twitter at Azure Mobile, and also mobile services at microsoft.com. So we're going to transition to QA real quick, and I think we have a couple questions lined up. So let me check out and see what we have. Give me just a moment. Okay, so first question is from Tom, who really likes a demo app. Fantastic. Thanks, Tom. And he'd like to know the process that happens for creating the UI and the UX for building these demos. Um, so that's a great question. What we've noticed with especially just learning process ourselves, but also with customers, is that the design process is absolutely essential for creating a great mobile application because the user interactions can be incredibly different than a keyboard where keyboard you have on a desktop application you have a full keyboard. Here in mobile you have swipes, you have screens that can transition from the inside or out, but then the interactions are oftentimes with just a thumb. So what we've done is that we always partner with our design team, and we have an internal design team, and there's also great design agencies that focus on mobile. And we rely on them and partner with them to say, hey, here's the scenario, here's the storyboard, and we do some rough mock-ups in tools like Balsamiq to do quick mock-ups. And then the design team creates the UI in Android and UI specific Android and iOS specific templates to say this is what the app should look like, this is what all the screens should look like. And then we put it in the hands of our developers to take those designs and then create the UI UX either in Xamarin Forms or Xamarin iOS and Android. Now, inevitably, sometimes you have to make compromises where what the designers come up with may not be able to be accomplished 100% or to the letter in Xamarin or just in mobile development in general. But then you have a back and forth and making sure that you've come to the right compromise and you're making the right decisions for the user. So there are also a number of videos on building Xamarin Forms apps, specifically if you're interested in Forms from our Evolve conference in 2014. And we also encourage you to check out evolve.xamarin.com. And we also have cross-platform mobile development guides on developer.xamarin.com. And we also have Charles Petzold's downloadable ebook on how to build Xamarin Forms apps. So all of those are available on. So just check out developer.xamarin.com or Google it, and you should be able to find it pretty easily. So next question is from Jorge. Is Windows Phone development available for Xamarin Studio on OS X? Unfortunately, the answer is no. So if you want to do Windows Phone development, or say Windows Forms development and deploy it on and test it on Windows Phone, you're going to have to do that on Visual Studio on Windows. And so you can, but you can still do iOS and Android development on Xamarin Studio on OS X. So this is a good question perhaps for Kirill. Is the CUD order preserved when working with a SQL database?
Yes. Yeah, the CUD order is preserved by the Azure Mobile SDK when replaying the changes against the CUD operations against the database.
Okay, great. So another question for you, Kirill, from Casper. Where do I set up what information should be asked for with, like, for example, a Facebook login, like name, birthday, and email, and how do I add this data into my say my database that I'm working on creating with the mobile app?
Yes, so you can use Facebook SDK in your mobile app. It's always best to use the actual Facebook SDK to log in with Facebook, which just gives you a single sign-on. Or you can use Azure Mobile Login API to use the Webflow. And once you have the Facebook token, you can access the user profile using Facebook APIs.
Okay, thanks, Kirill. I think another Azure question, is it possible to decide which elements of your data model get synced with Azure? So for example, if you have data fields which should be saved in the local database but not in the Azure cloud.
Yes, you obviously have full access to the underlying SQLite, so you can use SQLite however you like and use and put the data in the tables how you like it. You can also filter and limit what data you sync to the device from the cloud, so you don't bring the world into your device. You can if you're using Azure Mobile SDK to interact with SQLite tables, those tables, all those changes to those tables will be replayed against the remote Azure endpoints. So you basically have to, if you wanted to store some data locally and never sync to the cloud, you need to use the SQLite directly.
Okay, thanks, Kirill. Another good question, and this is on for Xamarin. What is the key difference between Xamarin and Apache Cordova on building cross-platform applications? So we encounter this question a lot, and so some of the key benefits of Xamarin is that, as I mentioned earlier, all of the apps are compiled to native binaries, and so you get native performance. You also get 100% API access to the underlying platform. So if you need to access things like Android Pay or talk with the camera specifically and do Bluetooth and all those types of things, you have 100% API access across iOS and Android via C# and Xamarin. Now, the difference with Apache Cordova are a couple key things. Yes, you can create cross-platform mobile applications, but the difference is that they are HTML based. So you create the HTML application, and then it gets they put a wrapper around it, and it's not a native application. It's essentially running within the browser on the device itself. So you run into a couple of key issues. The first one, for example, is that you have the performance limitations. So if you might be displaying a lot of data or you have a long list, the scrolling and that user experience may hang or may be very jerky for that user. Secondly, some of the transitions, like from screen to screen, if you're swiping and you have a screen transition to the left or right, or if you're going back, those can be jerky and they can hang on HTML5 as well. Secondly, you're not utilizing native controls. These are rendered HTML controls, and you're going to be using like a JavaScript framework like Ionic, for example, or you can use several others to create that to use that mobile framework. And so you have a couple challenges with those frameworks themselves. One is there's a plethora of different choices to choose from, which is both good and bad. But then finding the right community to help you out can be sometimes problematic. From a development perspective, the development experience can be quite tedious because not only are you having to learn multiple different languages, you have to be on your game as far as HTML5 is concerned. You have to be very good at JavaScript. You also have to be very good at the particular JavaScript framework that you chose. And then the debugging experience can actually be kind of glitchy because what you actually have to use are like say Chrome developer tools, and so you're going to be switching back and forth between multiple different tools and IDEs to have a good development experience. And then from a maintainability perspective, you're going to run into challenges because on the Xamarin side, you can reuse projects, you can reuse compiled DLLs, the compiled PCL DLLs versus PhoneGap, utilizing JavaScript libraries and whatever thing that you've done for your JavaScript app, you're going to have to re-import for other applications. So code reuse and keeping those things in sync is going to be pretty challenging using PhoneGap. Of course, I might be a little bit biased, but this is, we've seen these things for firsthand, and we've seen multiple customers try their proof of concept with PhoneGap. But then start using solutions like Xamarin or deciding to go native iOS with Objective-C and Java just because we weren't happy with the user experience and the developer experience with PhoneGap. So I think we have time for one more question, and let's see. So I got a question. This is for Kirill. Can you elaborate a bit on data synchronization in Azure App Services? Is it syncing local data, SQLite, with Azure services automatically?
Great question. Azure provides an SDK that allows you to synchronize SQLite, your SQLite data store with Azure endpoints, table controllers that we showed. At this time, we do not do sync automatically, but we offer you kind of fairly simple scaffolding where you can trigger sync based on push notifications or in-app messaging if you need to. In the future, we may, for some scenarios, we may introduce automatic sync as well.
Okay. Thanks, Kirill. So we're at the end of our time with the webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining today. Hopefully this was helpful to you. If you have any suggestions on future webinars or want to learn more, feel free to reach out to us. I also want to thank Kirill for his time and his expertise from the Azure App Services team. And I also want to thank Julia, who helped set this up, as well as numerous other folks behind the scenes at Xamarin. Joe and Craig, appreciate your help very much as well. So Julia, can I hand it back to you to wrap things up?
Sure. Thank you, Steve. And thank you everyone for attending today. We were inundated with questions, so we'll do our very best to get back to everybody who we couldn't get to today and make sure that we get back to you. So enjoy your day, and thanks again for attending.